Colorado, give us the proof. There are a lot of viewers. We'd love to know where babies are being executed after they're born. We would love to know where babies are being executed after they're born in Colorado. Let us all know.
I just told you, and I don't know how you define executed, but left to die. That has absolutely happened before, and it is something I talked about with RFK Jr. on my podcast several months ago when it was.
In this one, woke Brian Tyler Cohen is about to go head-to-head with Sage Steele. I think my favorite part is where Brian Tyler Cohen acts like he cares more about and knows more about women than Sage Steele does. It's pretty funny to me, and it's an example of how these woke Democrats love to virtue signal and think that they're always right in their virtue signaling. So I think you're going to like this one. I really enjoyed it, so let's get into it.
We're going to go to the next stage of our debate now and begin with a bizarre new Harris campaign ad voiced by Julia Roberts, which urges women to secretly defy their MAGA husbands.
Your turn, honey.
In the one place in America where women still have a right to choose, you can vote any way you want, and no one will ever know.
Did you make the right choice?
Sure did, honey.
Remember, what happens in the booth stays in the booth. Vote Harris Walls.
Well, the subtext appears to be that women aren't capable of making their own minds up and own decisions, and even worse, that they should be afraid if they do so. Here to debate that and more, a panel of a man and a woman who are certainly not shy about their politics. Brian Tyler Cohen, host of No Lie, and Sage Steele, the host of the Sage Steele Show. Well, welcome to both of you. Brian, I got to say, I found that ad patronizing and nauseating. And if I was a woman, I'd be like, sorry, what?
I think that we are defying reality or denying reality. I think we're denying reality if we are sitting here and pretending that there is not a culture of misogyny in the United States. If you're offended by that ad, can you actually not tell me that you're not more offended by the fact that Republicans have stripped women of their bodily autonomy in this country? Is that really what we're pretending that we're upset with? I mean, we have J.D. Vance, the vice presidential nominee right now for the Republican Party, who has gone on some tour across the country where he's called women who don't have kids childless cat ladies, who's attacked them, who's denied the legitimacy of families that don't have children. I mean, can we really say that we're more offended by that ad than the reality of the situation on the ground in the U.S. right now?
Let me just ask you, Brian, if the Democrats are the party of fairness and equality for women and are the standard bearers and flag wavers of women's rights, why is it that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris continue to support trans athletes competing in women's sport, which everybody knows is a grotesque attack on women's rights to fairness and equality? I'm bemused.
Piers, again, the same concept applies. The number of people that are A, worried about that in this election, and B, that actually impacts. Again, if you are worried about trans athletes, how are you not talking about the issue of women's bodily autonomy, of their reproductive freedom, of Republicans' threats to block women from traveling between states in this country?
I can explain that for you. It's not that we're concerned about the trans person. It's that we're concerned about the girls and the women who are participating in women's sports being infringed upon by those trans people, right? Which is to Piers's point that you would think the Democrats, who are seemingly the champions of, women's individuality and all this stuff, would care about the women being affected by biological men entering their sports. And not only that, his comparison, Brian Tyler Cohen's comparison of saying that how could you care about this but not care about the women being able to have abortions, is basically what he's saying, is that, women don't just get pregnant, right? There's preventative measures. If they don't want to have kids, they can do things to prevent that from happening, to prevent pregnancy from happening in the first place. There's multiple things. It's not new. And it's built into this argument from the left that women are stupid and don't understand or know how to prevent themselves from getting pregnant. It's a bullcrap, cop-out argument to conflate the two, because a little girl just competing in her sport or a grown woman competing in her sport in a women's category doesn't have any preventative measure. There's not apples to apples.
You try to have it both ways, where you pretend that the trans issue is something that upsets you to the ends of the earth, and yet
It does.
that impacts Piers, how many people does that impact in this
Let me
country? How
ask
is
you a
that
question.
actually something?
I love the way that Democrats like to pretend nobody cares, one, when they do, and secondly, it has no real impact on women's sport. The United Nations last week, the United Nations last week came out with a report that said that around the world, 900 medals had been deprived from going to biological women because they had gone to trans athletes in women's sport. 900. That is not a small thing. That is an erosion of women's rights around the world, and it's being promoted in the United States by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So when they position themselves as we are for women's rights, I say, as we would say in Britain, to a point, Lord Copper, because you're not when it comes to women's rights in sport. And there is an absolute conflict there. Let me bring in Sage here. I mean, Sage, this is where I think there's a real contradiction. How can you be for women's rights on abortion, but not in sport, for example?
It's completely hypocritical, just like what happened with the vaccine and that forced mandate, which I had to do to keep my job as well at Disney. So my body, my choice when it's convenient for you. And again, hashtag science, right? There has never been an issue that is this black and white. Brian, we can go back and forth and debate on the vaccine and the efficacy of it and all the, did it help, did it not? How many? There has never, ever, in the history of this universe, been an issue between men and women, and all of a sudden, well, I don't know, XX, XY, and it's okay if he has this and that. Stop it. And at the end of the day, it's actually much more. It's almost 1,100 now, Piers, and this is just from a couple of days ago, trophies that have been taken away from women or girls. But that doesn't count on the lower levels where there are no trophies given out per se. We're talking about Olympic boxing and stuff like that. But when you look at, junior high school track scholarships, you got to finish in the top 3 to go ahead to state. But now you're 4th because I live in the state of Connecticut, where one of the major lawsuits first came from 5 or 6 years ago. Actually, a young woman I live next door to. This is happening everywhere, but you don't want to talk about it because you know deep down, you're not going to admit it, but deep down you know that it's wrong. And I also think it's interesting that you go with this low-hanging fruit and all those talking points of the childless cat women from 4+ years ago, completely out of context. At the end of the day, stick with the facts. By the way, I'm not offended by that Julia Roberts stupid commercial. Like I think it's so lame, and it is very condescending. Like I'm afraid to tell my husband, my boyfriend, my partner, whatever it is, who I'm going to vote for and just be quiet about it. Like stop it. And most importantly,
do you think that
is the only issue? Why is that the only issue that you guys are focusing on? Abortion, women's rights. Have things changed? Yes, but there are plenty of states that have 0 restrictions where you can do it up to the moment the baby's born, and I guess you're okay with that.
Do you think that ad is more offensive and more condescending than women's bodily autonomy being stripped away? Are you more offended by that ad than the actual reality on the ground?
Well, maybe because of the fact that women's bodily autonomy is not being stripped away. It is.
No?
It has never been part of the Constitution. It never has been.
There isn't an abortion desert. There isn't an abortion desert in the South. There isn't
there
abortion
are more
bans in the South.
restrictions.
Women
there
are able to go get
more
abortions in the
yes,
South.
but it also there are more. You asked me a question to let me answer. There are definitely more restrictions depending on where you live. There are also many states where there are fewer restrictions. #none, where you can do it up to the moment a baby is born, and even in some cases we have seen after. So let's not act like it's only one way. There are less restrictions in some states.
Which
10,
cases
11,
have we seen?
And then there's many others where there are so many more. This has been through the years. This is before Dobbs, by the way. There's so many things. But tell me why this is your only issue. Tell me why this is your only issue, Brian. Why is this your main focus? How about the border? How about the economy? How about endless wars across the pond? Like, that's the stuff that by the way, black voters, Hispanic voters, everyone's talking about is the economy. This is the one thing, because that's the only thing that you think you can, quote unquote, win when this country is falling apart and people don't feel safe.
Which cases have we seen abortions happen after the baby's born? Because you just said that, so I'm curious where that's happened.
It happened for sure in Colorado. I believe it also happened in Minnesota. I'll be glad, and you know what? I'm sure Piers can connect us.
I mean, educate me.
Excuse me. I'm sure Piers can connect us. I'm sure Piers can. There were babies left
So you have no
on
proof.
the table
You're just saying
birth.
you're sure it's happening in Colorado.
You gotta love how Sage Steele goes to answer his question and then he repeats the question like he didn't understand or hear her beginning to answer, right? And what she's referring to right there is former Virginia Governor Northam said, quote, "If a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered, the infant would be kept comfortable, the infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and family desired, and then a decision would ensue between the physicians and the mother." You can't sit here and act like post-birth abortion hasn't been or wasn't an option or talked about by Democratic leaders, a former governor in this country in Virginia. It's completely relevant, and although he doesn't like it, it's just the truth. And it's an example of how far the left is willing to go because they do not value the young people of our country, born or unborn. It's just as simple as that.
Colorado, give us the proof. There are a lot of viewers. We'd love to know where babies are being executed after they're born. We would love to know where babies are being executed after they're born in Colorado. Let us all know.
I just told you, and I don't know how you define executed, but left to die. That has absolutely happened before, and it is something I talked about with RFK Jr. on my podcast several months ago when it was late-term abortion, all that whole debate. Again, I'm sure Piers can connect us. I'll gladly go back and forth with you because I respect the hell out of you. At the end of the day, my question for you is, isn't there more? How about the topics that I listed that you completely ignore in the border and 10.4 million minimum people coming over the border? That's who we know about.
I'd love to
not
talk
the other
about
people
the
that have
border.
got.
I'd love to
no,
talk
but you
about-
don't talk about that. You're talking about women's autonomy. And by the way, I'm a woman. You're not. Focus on the other things as well as that, because there's so many more important things and you know it. But because you guys are stressed out about how this campaign is going, you're focusing on that one issue, abortion, abortion, abortion. How about protecting our borders so those young girls don't have to make that kind of a choice if something bad happens when a criminal comes across the pond and hurts them or rapes them? Focus on that.
Damn straight. You know, all these Democratic talking points when it comes to women's health. I remember a situation where I went to a Rays game a couple years ago, right? And they had a dude standing out front. I don't know if it was, from the Rays or whatever, but there was a dude standing out by the crosswalk. All 4 games that I went to in a row, this dude was standing directly next to the crosswalk that leads from parking lot to stadium, talking about sign this petition and protect women's health care. And then when you go and look at it, you realize it's talking about abortion, right? They can't just come out and say it because the way that it is, because they have to trick you. They have to disguise it as women's health care, when the reality is they're basically trying to get women, they're trying to trick women into signing, yeah, I'm for women's health care rights. But the reality is they were signing a petition that said they support abortion. And then they take that petition, those numbers, those signatures, up to a board or whatever, and then they get it put on a ballot, right? And right now, they basically have this Amendment 4 in Florida talking about abortion, and I know the support that comes from it, the way that they used, the thing that they used to get it on the ballot is lying to women like that guy was doing outside of the baseball stadium. It's disgusting. And I like how Sage Steele worded that right there when she referred to, where was my body, my choice, when I had to either keep my job at Disney by taking a particular vaccine or lose my job. You can't sit here and claim that you're on the side of women's rights when really your only talking point is abortion. It's what it is. They want to say women's healthcare, women's bodily autonomy, and everything like that. Just the ignorance built into that excuse is nonsense. It's just completely astronomical nonsense. Like I said before, women know how to prevent themselves from getting pregnant. And if they don't want to have kids, they should apply those preventative measures rather than depend on the government to provide them with free abortions or allow them, the federal government particularly, And that's the craziest part about it is that, Donald Trump just wants the abortion issue to be left on the states. He wants it to be left to the individuals to vote within a state, and that's how our republic is built of 50 states plus Puerto Rico, I think at least, for people to have the right to vote how they want to live without a federal mandate. And if you ask me, I think there should be very few, if any, federal mandates. Really, the states should be able to govern and rule and have their own laws, and the federal government just defend our borders, make federal deals, do things with the American people's best interest in mind, rather than trying to pass federal laws that requires federal judges, federal officers, all this spending that costs us more and more on our tax dollars. You know, that's why I'm fine with the Republicans shooting down that last border deal. You know, the Democrats want to say Donald Trump stepped in and said that the Democrat pundits want to say Donald Trump stopped the last border bill. If you care about the border, why did Donald Trump step in and stop it so that he could have something, a talking point to run on? No, it was about, we don't want people, from my perspective, I don't want to create a bunch of extra jobs and pay an extra bunch of judges with my tax dollars so that they can just facilitate this fraud in asylum, because that's what everybody's trying to claim when they come across the border, when that doesn't even fit the parameters of what an asylum seeker actually is. And so, no, I want fewer federal jobs. I like how Elon Musk was able to take over Twitter, change it to X, fire 80% of the developers, and make the platform better. I mean, it's great. I love cutting the fat and getting down to the basics and then making it better. And that's exactly what we need to do to our federal government. If that's something you agree with, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, share this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.